Hello, hello, hello. I did like an airplane landing. I am out here in the beautiful forest, enjoying the breeze, and I've just been having some topics kind of weighing on me lately that I've been going through, and I feel like it could be helpful for other people if I share. If you are new to my channel, by the way, hi, my name is Julie. I am a new believer and I am sharing my journey with faith as a new Christian. As it stands now, I am 6 months in after being saved, so I'm just kind of sharing what I learned along the way and what it's like, and the trials and the tribulations, because I feel like there's a lot of other people out there who are probably on a very similar path, and I just don't see a whole lot of people talking about this part of the journey. So I guess I just figured, why not me? Sometimes I kind of regret that, but I'm already in it. So listen, I'm not gonna stop now, okay? I'm not gonna let ignorant comments or anything like that stop me. So I have been thinking a lot about, and this is a vulnerable topic, I have been thinking a lot about the concept and the warning in the Bible to not be unequally yoked. And generally speaking, that refers to a romantic partnership, a marriage. I think it could also refer to, honestly, friendships and business partnerships even, but generally speaking, that does refer to romantic relationships and marriage when you hear people talking about that. And if you're not fully aware of what that means, because I wasn't either, to be equally yoked in the times of the Bible was kind of an agricultural analogy, because they would kind of yoke two animals together and kind of have them walk side by side. And if one of them was not equally yoked to the other, this one's kind of down here and it's dragging along this one, right? So that's kind of the visual of what it means to be unequally yoked. And the Bible basically says, listen, don't marry an unbeliever because you will be unequally yoked. And also, what do you even have in common with them? In the spiritual world, you really don't have anything in common with them if they are not living their life in Christ. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. It does also say to kind of stay in the state that Christ found you in, so to speak, and not to rush to get married if you're single, or to get divorced if you're married to an unbeliever. It says if you're already married to somebody who is unbeliever, to stay in that marriage and to behave in such a way where your conduct maybe eventually wins your husband or wife over. So it basically says to treat them exactly like how you would treat a godly husband or a godly wife, to be respectful and to be loving, and all those things that we are called to do and to truly act out, right? So there's that. But if you're single, not to rush and try to get married. And for me, I've kind of been in the middle. So a year ago, I met somebody and we really hit it off, and we really had the same vision for life and a lot of the same preferences, and we just had a lot of fun together. And we both were dating for marriage, both wanted to get married, and we were gonna get married. We went shopping for rings and we did the whole thing, right? And then what ended up happening with that was, over the summer, when we were really seriously considering getting married, we came to something that made us kind of stop in our tracks, which I think is positive, but it was obviously difficult in the moment, which is that he is Jewish. And he is not necessarily super practicing at this point, but his family is very religious, and a lot of his friends are quite religious as well. So in order for us to get married, and without having a lot of conflict go on in his life and for our life going forward if we were to be together, the best thing for me to do would be to convert to Judaism, right? So at this point in time, a year ago, I had not found Christ yet. I was about 6-8 months away from finding him, or him finding me. And I had been looking into Judaism before I met this man, actually, because I had felt a pull to get closer to God. And I don't know, I just felt curious about Judaism, so I started looking into it more. And I am partially ethnically Jewish myself, Eastern European Jewish, but I am Jewish from a paternal line. My grandfather is the one who is Jewish, and so in that world, I am not considered Jewish. So if I was to marry a man who is, I would be considered a non-Jew, and so our children would be considered not Jewish. And in that culture, that's kind of a big deal. That's kind of the most controversial thing that you could do. So anyway, that was a big kind of roadblock for us, because as much as I was excited to get married and start a family and start living that life that I feel really, not only do I feel called to live, but I feel like it's the most natural for me, and I feel called to that role, and I've always felt called to that role, even before learning about how as women we're really well suited to that role, right? So I didn't even know that, but I knew that in order to convert to Judaism, it would be one, a very long process, at least a year. And I knew that, I'm not much of a rule follower. I'm not really the sort of person who just does things because that's what we do. I want to know the why behind everything, and I want to know the meaning behind everything. I'm not the sort of person who just does things just to do them or just to check off a box. So I knew that for me to stand in a house of God and to promise to live my life by the Torah, which, if you didn't know, the Torah is the first 5 books of the Old Testament in the Christian Bible, right? I knew that I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that, and even if it meant kind of lying or white lying or fibbing it, I was like, I can't do that. It's not right. So that kind of stopped us in our tracks, because it made it kind of complicated for him to move forward. Just there's so much cultural, familial pressure in that culture to not marry outside of the group, basically. So yeah, and especially what it would have asked of me going forward, to dress a certain way around his family, to cover my hair after getting married, around them with like a wig or something. I was like, I don't think that's me. I don't think I could do that. So that was that, and we were still seeing each other, but both being kind of confused. It's like, okay, so where is this gonna go now? But lo and behold, I end up finding Jesus and becoming completely and utterly devoted to him immediately. It wasn't like a choice that I made. I do believe in predestination. I do believe in the reformed way of seeing things at this point. So I do believe that us as people, I don't know if we can genuinely make the choice to come to Christ. I don't know if we truly ever seek God on our own. I think that God chose us from the beginning to be a part of his elect, so to speak, and he put the desire in our heart for Christ. That's what I think, because before it happened for me, I didn't really get Jesus. I didn't get Christians. I just didn't get it. Never mind the Bible. I really just didn't get it. I had respect for it, and I was always kind of a little bit drawn to it, but I just didn't understand it. And then suddenly I got it, and I was just like, wow, the change that I felt in my heart, the feeling that I felt in my body was like, this is true, this is it. I don't know, that was it. And it's still going strong for me 6 months later, which I'm the sort of person where I get really obsessed with things or really interested in things, but then I easily kind of let them go, and I get over it in a few days, maybe a few weeks. So for me, the fact that this is still ongoing, still as strong as it was then 6 months later is a good sign. But yeah, I don't know, it wasn't a choice that I made. It really wasn't. It was one day just a switch went off, and I just was like, a life without Jesus is not a life worth living at this point. I would never ever go back, right? So mind you, me and this guy, we're still kind of seeing each other while this is happening, but we were just not sure what was gonna happen, and then that happened, right? So that was obviously, you can imagine how interesting that was, right? And at that point, we kind of decided to call it off, because obviously, how are we going to get married if we really literally have different beliefs on this? It's one thing if one person has a stronger pull towards a religious belief, a religious life, and the other person is kind of whatever about it, then it's okay. My grandparents, actually, who are the only example of a traditional, happy, long-lasting marriage that I have, praise God, they're a mixed faith couple. My grandma was raised devoutly Catholic, and my grandpa is Jewish. He was never practicing, so it was kind of whatever for him to agree to raise the kids Catholic up to a certain point. But yeah, I think that could only work if one person is not that devout, not that passionate, I guess you could say. If both people are super passionate about their belief system and they're different, I don't know. So yeah, we were okay, well, clearly we can't get married now, and whatever. So that's been what that is. but we are still in pretty close proximity to each other. We still see each other pretty frequently, and it's just been like a very weird situation because everything else is great except for that. And it's not easy to, to call something off because of religious beliefs, but it is obviously a big enough thing. Like, okay, well, how would it ever work if, from the Christian perspective, the man is to lead the family towards Christ continuously? The man is to be the pastor of his home, essentially. And I do believe in the biblical hierarchy that, God has laid out for us in terms of marriage. I do honestly believe that it's what's healthiest for us, it's what's best for us, it's what makes us happiest, honestly, like if done correctly. If both partners are healthy and they're truly, devoted to being good spouses and good parents and all of that, right? But yeah, if you have two different beliefs on this, you're unequally yoked, right? So I just wanted to kind of share that if you're out there dealing with something similar, I feel for you. I know that it's really hard and it's really confusing, and sometimes it feels like, oh, like maybe we could still make it work. Like some people have interfaith marriages and they make it work. And it's like, yeah, I mean, they do. But at the same time, obviously your life would be a whole lot easier if you marry somebody who's on the same page as you with this. Like it's kind of a really big deal. I mean, when it comes to my situation, it could be tempting sometimes because Judaism is the parent of Christianity, right? Jesus was a Jew. He never set out to make Christianity. He is a Jewish Messiah, right? So it's not like it's like of two completely different worlds on two different planets, but the reason why there is even a separation between Christianity and Judaism is that after Jesus, there was some Jews who converted to Christianity because they saw what Jesus did and they were like, okay, that's undeniably the Son of God, right? But there was other people who descended from the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and they were just like, yeah, no, he was not the Messiah. Take anything out of the Bible that referenced things that clearly relayed that he was, and Isaiah and the other prophets spoke about Jesus in a way that when you look back on it, you're like, clearly they were talking about Jesus, right? But they took some parts of that out, and so now, 2,000 years later, most Jewish people don't believe that Jesus Christ was their Messiah. They are still waiting for that Messiah. And so that is a huge difference of opinion, and that plays out on a day-to-day basis if you are in a relationship, because again, I do believe the man is supposed to lead. Like I'm totally cool with that. Obviously I'm a pretty opinionated person. I'm a very passionate person. It doesn't make me a doormat. It doesn't make me super subservient. And you know what I mean? I do believe that it is best to let a man be in the leadership role overall. It doesn't mean you don't have a say. But honestly, ladies, that makes life easier for us. Like I kind of don't see the pushback on that. I do get why it was necessary for us to obtain equal rights, but at this point in time, I kind of feel like the worldly thing that we are supposed to kind of just act like men and go into the workforce and provide and work hard and do everything that men do is a psyop. I think that they wanted more taxes, and so they sent the 50% of the rest of the population into the workforce. And yes, of course, as a woman, it is important to have your own money. It is important to have your own kind of life in general outside of your relationships. So at the very least, you keep things interesting, right? And you keep a semblance of yourself outside of this man, outside of this, marriage or this partnership that you're in, right? But in general, I have always felt like traditional dynamics with men and women, like in a relationship, in a marriage, they've always made sense to me even before I came to Christ. So I might be biased. And it's not to say that that's like a one size fits all, because I don't necessarily think that. But if you are a follower of Christ and you do want to have a biblical marriage, then it's been laid out for us exactly how to do so in the Bible, so that's really helpful. But yeah, it says not to yoke yourself to an unbeliever. So if you're already married to one, you're called to stick it out, and hopefully maybe one day your behavior, your conduct will show them the love of Christ through just your actions. But if you're single, you're not called to rush and get married. But if you're in a relationship, if you're in a worldly boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, okay, so that's where things get kind of tricky and complicated, because obviously I'm getting comfortable now. So obviously, in biblical times, there was no boyfriend, girlfriend thing. You didn't live with somebody if you weren't married. Just didn't do that. So the Bible doesn't even talk about that because it really didn't even exist. And I think times were probably a lot simpler in a time period where that didn't exist, because now it's really weird that we have this kind of in-between option of being single in a relationship or married, because yeah, in the Bible there was two options, and that really made things very simple, I feel like. Nowadays, there are a lot of people who they date their boyfriend and girlfriend for years. They may not even ever get married. They may have kids before they get married, if they even do. They certainly move in together and do all the things that married couples do, just without the legal paperwork, right? That is very, very normal in our current culture, and I've done that. I've experienced that. I wasn't raised in the church, and I wasn't raised with Christian values, so I thought that was normal, and I didn't know any better, and so I did that. But at the same time, if I'm honest with myself, I did feel like in the back of my mind, there's just like, there's an anxiety that dynamic produces in women, because it's just not natural for us. And I think that being in that kind of in between, he's your boyfriend, he's not your husband sort of situation, where, our instinct is to be fully devoted and loyal to the man that we're with and the man that we love. And so we will treat that man like he's our husband, even when he's not. And I have seen that hurt so many people, and that has hurt me, I myself included in that. I've been very hurt by that, because that is our natural inclination, right? And we live in a world right now where it's like people date for years until they figure out if they want to get married. There are some outliers to that, and usually, they are of some kind of religion, because otherwise people see it as, why would you take the risk of getting divorced, when you could just like kind of break up and you don't have to deal with the legal paperwork and money and whatever else a divorce requires, which I get. It makes sense. But back in the day, I mean, marriage was pretty much for life. Like, you weren't really even thinking about getting divorced unless the absolute worst things were to befall you, right? And to happen in your marriage, right? So nowadays, people kind of treat marriage like it's a really romantic, fun thing to do. And, if we work out, we work out. If we don't, we don't. Like, whoopsie. I don't know. We just live in a really confusing time, because even down to like our government paperwork, if we're honest with ourselves, there's two options. You're single or you're married. It's not like it's complicated. Like, you don't fill that in at the DMV or whatever, right? Or at the doctor's office. Like, I'm in a relationship, I'm in a situationship. Like, like, it's not real. But at the same time, as human beings, we crave love, we crave connection, we crave togetherness. That's what human beings do, right? So obviously, oh my gosh, coming into Christianity from that world has been kind of a whirlwind for me, where I was in a relationship with somebody about to get married, and then we stopped from getting married because I couldn't commit myself to Judaism. Then next thing you know, I'm a full-on Jesus freak. And the most logical thing to do is to just kind of separate and go our separate ways, and just be single and devote yourself to God. But it's just not always that easy to do that, honestly. It's easier said than done, and I know that is the right thing to do, and that is what I'm trying to do, but it is very difficult. So I just kind of wanted to make this for anybody who's out there dealing with something similar. I know how hard it is. I know what you're going through. I know how it feels, and at the same time, like, I'm here to remind you what the Bible says about it, because it says not to yoke ourselves to unbelievers, because the odds are definitely stacked against you. And I know that it also says, if you burn with lust, or if you burn with passion, it's better to get married, than to burn with passion. But I think a lot of people probably rush into getting married because of that verse, where they're like, okay, that's what Paul said, so let's do it. But marriage is supposed to be a lifelong commitment. It's supposed to be a sacred covenant between you, your spouse, and God. It's not supposed to be just like this like random thing you do. It definitely has more weight than that. So that's just been kind of bothering me lately. At the end of the day, though, I know that God, his ways are good and they are perfect. And I look back on my life at any of the kind of challenging situations I've been in the past, and they always were for my good, and they always worked out exactly as they were meant to, and their timing even worked out exactly as they were supposed to, and through very little effort on my part a lot of times. Like, he always has had his hand in things, and so I have a lot of faith that things are working out as they're supposed to. And all we have to do is continue to walk with him, continue to learn, deepen our faith, and try to be obedient, honestly, because to have one foot in and one foot out causes a lot of pain, and it makes you susceptible to the enemy to come and grab you, right? He prowls around like a lion looking for those he can devour, which essentially means he can't devour everybody, right? People who are strong in Jesus, you can't get to them. But if you're kind of just, I don't know, teetering into the world a little bit here and there, you're vulnerable, you're susceptible, right? So I just wanted to kind of share that. I don't really have any kind of happy ending to that story right now. We're not together because I don't feel like it's right to be in a boyfriend-girlfriend worldly relationship. I don't want to be in a fake situation, for lack of a better term. Like, I know that God ordained for us to be in the sanctity of marriage because it is what is best for us. And when we share ourselves so intimately with people who are not truly ours, it's painful. It causes a lot of heartache, and it just I don't know. I think he made things the way he made them for a reason, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And at the same time, I don't shame anybody who lives in a different way. I get it. I've done it. I completely understand. And I know how hard it is if you're out there and you're dating someone and you're not married, and you do the things that come along with dating somebody, but you're trying to walk with Christ. You're trying to be with God, and you're trying to do what his word says. I understand the struggle that you might be dealing with. And I just want you to know that we are called to take the scripture seriously and to really live by it. And the reason is that it's truly for our best. God has our best interests in mind. The goal is that we get to a point where we're like, you know what, God, I will go anywhere and I will do anything in order to glorify you, in order to serve you, in order to truly represent you well. And that might require some changes on your end. That might require you breaking up with your boyfriend or girlfriend. And if you don't see yourselves getting married, that is what it is. For me, the biggest problem I have with that, to be completely honest with you, is that it's really hard in this day and age to live completely on your own and to kind of have everything under control. I've had my own place, and I've had jobs, and I've taken care of all my bills, and it's hard. It's not impossible, but as an artist, as an entrepreneur, as a creative little wandering forest fairy girl, I find that to be very, very difficult. Like, I really love being in the role of being a homemaker and taking care of the house, and taking care of the meals, and keeping the house cute and clean and pretty, and keeping myself cute and clean and pretty. Like, I like being in that role. I really do. I don't know who wouldn't, but obviously I like that's preferable, right? So it's hard for me to kind of leave that behind and to go back into kind of what I perceive to be like the harsh jungle of the world, where I'm just like completely on my own. And I guess, if I'm honest, I have a lot of trauma from those periods of time in my life where I just had to make it work completely by myself, and it was really hard. And I think a lot of women stay in certain relationships not just out of love or positive things like that, but also because our need as women for male protection is very ingrained, and to feel like you don't have it is very scary. It's very hard to be in the world without knowing that you have that, and not a lot of people will say that, not a lot of people will speak about that, because in this day and age, that's actually, I guess, kind of countercultural to say. Like, what I'm supposed to say is like, we're independent women, and we could do it on our own, and we don't need men, and this and that. Like, listen, I've never really resonated with that. I have been an independent woman. I have done the whole career woman, city girl thing. I've done it. I've done the girl bossing thing. I had businesses. I did it all, and it just burnt me out so badly. I think partially because it just really wasn't me, but I just felt like it had to be me. Like, I didn't have a choice. Like, that's what the culture tells us we do. Until we find our husband and get married and have a family, you focus on a career and making money first. And that's always just been really challenging for me. I hope that, I'm blessed enough to have children, and to, if I have daughters, to kind of teach them that it's okay if they have the inclination to want to be a homemaker. Like, that's honestly all I ever really wanted to do. I never really had like a real dream job aside from maybe being an artist or a creator of some kind, but I feel like those two things can go together, so they don't feel like they're at odds for me necessarily. But I never dreamt of being a career woman and everything that comes along with that. That just never felt right for me. But I had to do that, in order to survive by myself, having my own place and doing all of that. And I really commend people who are out here doing that, even if they resonate with what I'm saying and deep down they don't want to be doing that, because there's such an anguish with that. I don't think people talk about that enough. Like, there's just, the ways of this world have always been harsh. They've always been challenging. We probably have it easier than any other generation in history, honestly. But at the same time, our world is so backwards. We don't acknowledge that men and women are different, and we are kind of suited towards different things. And I don't know, I don't really believe the 9 to 5 workplace was made for women. Like, it literally wasn't. It was made for men first, and then we kind of came in there later, which is fine. I don't have anything against women working, obviously. I think it's great if you could really manage to swing that and you make your own money, you pay all your bills, you handle everything. Like, I have a lot of respect for women who, they seem to do that with a lot of ease. But I just, like, I kind of struggle with that, to be honest with you. I really prefer life, not only because I know people say, well, yeah, obviously you prefer if a man is providing for you and working and you get to do everything else, but it's like, yeah, but that's like work too, especially if you're like me and you come from the secular world and you have played house before, then you know that cooking and cleaning and taking care of things, taking care of yourself, that takes effort. It's not like effortless. Like, unless you're, shooting to be a California trophy wife who just goes to Pilates and drinks Chardonnay all day. I mean, even that takes some effort, because guess what that kind of dynamic is, because I don't know if you know this, I used to be a sugar baby, right? So I know what that kind of dynamic is like also. And I've had proposals from men when I was in that world, and I knew that the deal was he provides and I have to stay looking young and hot as long as possible. And whenever I have the audacity to age, or I don't know, to gain weight if I have a baby or something, or whatever it is, like, things are on thin ice. Like, that is what the trophy wife life really is on the inside. Unless you have a really genuinely good man who just happens to be well off, that's awesome, and that's kind of something different. But I'm talking about the relationships where it's specifically an older man with money and a young woman who is physically attractive. That's the trade. That's what's happening there. So that's actually a job in and of itself. It's not like it's not backbreaking labor necessarily, but it is labor in itself. It's glamour labor, it's beauty labor, right? So that's its own thing. I'm not shooting for that. I don't want to be just an object, obviously. That really hurts. That doesn't feel good, to just be somebody's little doll. Like, that actually hurts and feels terrible. As women, we can choose our partner, our husband, but our kids can't choose their father. So it's a really serious decision. It's not something, to just check off because you're a certain age, and there's so much pressure. It's so crazy in society. There is so much pressure. There's always been pressure on women with this. There's always been pressure, and younger in the past. Now it's a little bit different because people get married later because they're more focused on their careers and whatever. But it's still like this biological feeling you get when you're in your 20s, your mid to late 20s. There's just this feeling that comes over you, and it's like intense. Like, when I was in my early 20s and I worked with girls in this age range that I'm in now, I like felt that from them, and I was like, chill, like, whatever. It's not. And of course I had a boyfriend, and like, I didn't get it. Now that I'm in that phase of life, I'm like, oh girl, I get it. Like, it's just, there's such an intense feeling because we don't have the time that men have to kind of just mess around and do whatever. Like, if you want kids, especially if you want a bigger family, which I would like to have, I don't know what I'm meant to have, but it's not like I have all the time in the world to do that. Like, I'm still in my 20s, but it's just it's just like a feeling about it that I constantly have to work against and be like, no, I know that God has in store for me something amazing. He always has. He's never let me down. He's never left me, He's always given me things that were even beyond what I even could imagine. Why would that be any different now that I'm actually walking with him and trying to be obedient to him and trying to do right by him? And from a Christian perspective, the way I think about it is doing things out of fear, like getting married in a rushed way out of fear because you're in your late 20s or your 30s or whatever it is, just to lock it down and just to have kids, like even if the man, in question is maybe not the right man or whatever it is operating out of fear. And I get how tempting that is because, again, society and our biological pressures, they come together and they're just like a tornado of intensity. It's very intense. Like, trust me, I get it. But to operate out of fear is to operate from the enemy. That's not of God. God doesn't ever really encourage us to operate out of fear. Maybe to be, God-fearing, to have respect for him in a certain sense, but it's not the same feeling. Anything that gives you that kind of anxiety and fear and like tension of like, oh, I gotta do this, or I gotta, that's of the world. And at worst, it's of the enemy, right? Which is kind of like one and the same. But yeah, those are things that I've been thinking about, being unequally yoked. What to do if you've come to Christ, but you were in or are in a worldly boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. What do you do? I'm pretty sure most people would tell you exactly what you don't want to hear. Either get married or break up. And that's pretty much what it is. Unfortunately, there's not really a whole lot of in between. And I know how much nuance there could be in each individual situation, and especially as women, especially as people. Like, let's be real for a second. It's hard out here right now to do everything on your own, financially, physically, mentally, spiritually. Like, I know that there has to be other people out there who struggle with that, like I've struggled with that. And if you're in a situation where you're living with a partner, not just because, you love each other and all of that good stuff, but also for financial reasons, which a lot of people are, let's be honest, it's not that easy to just get up and move out, okay? It's not that easy to do that. So listen, I am with you. I hear you. I feel you. I get you. If you're in a situation like that, I completely understand. It is so hard. It is so confusing sometimes. But just know that whatever is of God will not confuse you. It will not make you feel unsure. It will not make you feel anxious, probably. It will not make you feel fearful. It will make you feel calm. It will make you feel sure. You will know that you're doing the right thing. So that's all I can say on that. I'm not in a place yet where I can kind of wrap that up in a perfect little bow. And so here's what I did, and everything worked out perfectly. Still kind of in this weird interim of like, I don't really know what's happening. I think because I've moved so much. In my 20s, I've moved almost every single year for the last like 5 years. I'm exhausted of moving. I'm exhausted of running. I'm exhausted of starting over. I mean, COVID was a whole thing for everybody. We barely even ever talk about that. Like all the stuff that went down during that we're all still kind of probably recovering from. And just try to be like, oh, everything's normal, Like, there's just so much that has happened in the last few years. So I'm open to what is meant to be. I trust in him entirely. That is all that he wants from us, is to be open to going wherever he needs us to go and doing whatever he needs us to do in order to glorify him and to honestly live our best life. He wants what is best for us. He is our Father, so he's never going to lead you just straight up to the slaughter for no good reason. You might be going through trials and tribulations that seem like, okay, God, not really sure what's going on here, if you love me, and kind of confused. But, I mean, just think of the story of Job. I mean, think of so many stories in the Bible where people were really going through it, and ultimately it ended up making sense. And sometimes it didn't even end up making sense for them. It made sense for their children or their children's children, which is like, that's a tough pill to swallow. But listen, there's a bigger plan, there's a bigger purpose for your life than we can even see. And if you are already at a point where you are walking with God and you believe in Jesus and you are just on this path, you're trying to do right by him, you're trying to understand the Bible and live by the Bible, listen, it's not meant to be the easiest path, obviously, otherwise everybody would do it. Give yourself grace. If you slip up, if you find yourself falling into sin, the best thing to do is to get up and try again. Every time you slip up and you fail, all he asks of us is just to keep trying. We're not meant to be perfect, but we are meant to have accountability and, be responsible for our actions. Like, we are fallen creatures. We are very susceptible to sin and to just kind of doing what our flesh wants sometimes instead of what God wants, and that's a part of our makeup after the fall. It's not just you, that's an all of us problem. We all struggle with that. Maybe some people don't talk about it and they act like they're literally perfect, but only one person was perfect, and that was Jesus, and none of us are Jesus as far as I know. So yeah, I think when it comes to struggling with sin, I think the most important thing you could do is just getting back up on that horse and ignoring that feeling of guilt or shame that makes you apprehensive to open up your Bible again, to talk to God again, to pray, to go to church. Just get back in the game and that will keep you on the straight and narrow. You know, it was never, it never said that as soon as you find Christ you're going to be absolutely perfect forever and you're never going to sin again. But obviously he would tell people when he healed them, go and don't sin again so that worse things don't happen to you. So that's kind of always in the back of my mind, because I've had people ask me, well, if Jesus died for our sins already, why can't we sin? Because he already like paid the price for us, so aren't we good? And it's like, yeah, but if you love somebody and they saved you, you want to do right by them. So just like any other relationship, sometimes you're going to slip up. You're not going to be perfect, but if you have the right heart posture where you want to do right and you're trying and you're learning, I mean, especially if you're new, if you're watching this and you're a newbie like I am, there's going to be times where you slip up. You are still being sanctified, you are still being cleansed, you are still probably getting out of the old lifestyles you were in and finding yourself in a new way of being. And there's so many facets of that when it comes to friends and relationships and ways of thinking, ways of speaking, you know, habits and the way you dress. And I mean, there's so much, right? So give yourself a little bit of grace, but at the same time, hold yourself accountable and know that if you ever have a question about something, about how you should be conducting yourself, about what you should do, the Bible does have an answer for you, and you're probably not always going to like it. It's not going to be what you want to hear necessarily, but it's probably what you need. So listen, I'm saying that to you as much as I'm saying it to myself, okay? So yes, per usual, the sun is setting. I like to film my videos near sunset because that is my cue to stop rambling on. Otherwise, I could probably keep going. So definitely need to stretch my legs. Oof, been sitting here for a while. But yes, so in summary, if you are dealing with the problem of being unequally yoked, I feel you, I understand, I get it. Ask God for guidance, but ultimately, you know, put your trust in the scriptures, put your trust that God has relayed what is truly best for us. I know that it's not always what you want to hear, it's not always easy, it's not the easiest pill to swallow, right? But, you know, have faith that things are working out for your highest good and for everyone's good around you. And who knows? I mean, there is a small possibility that you are meant to be the salt in your situation, that you are meant to be the one who kind of starts a domino effect of people finding God, of people finding Jesus. That is possible, and that's something that I think about sometimes, because, you know, just being around people who are not Christian a lot, I'm always kind of just like, God, why did you place me here? Like, this is kind of uncomfortable, and it's difficult. It's not easy to always be graceful and patient, and it's hard to not feel understood. It's hard to kind of feel like the odd one out, and sometimes I'm like, God, why? Like, why did you put me here? This is hard. And the answer that I get back is to be the salt. Like, if you're not there, then who's gonna, I mean, who's, you know, if not you, then who? You know, so I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess so. It's not always easy, but I mean, that's true, right? So it could be the case for you. But as I heard another creator say, her name is Angela, she hosts the Heaven and Healing podcast, and she was saved. She came out of the New Age like I did, and her boyfriend, who she was living with, or her fiance, I think they were already engaged, was agnostic, I think. And yeah, she was saved, and it really freaked him out, and, you know, they were engaged to be married, and then, you know, she was like, well, I guess, I don't know, like, I guess we can't get married, and it says not to marry an unbeliever, so, and I believe it took him like 6 to 9 months, something like that, but he actually ended up getting saved too. And they are married and they have a baby girl. So I don't know, like, sometimes it does work out, but even she said, listen, I wasn't betting on it working out. At a certain point, I just had to let go and be like, God, if this is not your will for me, if this is not my husband, if this is not who you have in mind for me, then, you know, I'm willing to let it go. And that was actually when her fiance got saved. So it's always about just letting go and letting God, honestly. Just putting your entire love and faith and trust in him is truly what he wants from us. So yeah, if you're dealing with that, I feel you, and I hope that, provided at least a little comfort that other people are also dealing with it. It's not the easiest thing in the world, especially when you see other people who are so happily married and have their kingdom marriage, and it's so beautiful to see, but it also can make you really sad if you're in a situation where you're like, oh, so close, but not quite, like it hurts, so I get it. But yeah, go to the scripture. It will never lead you astray, right? So there's that. And if you are struggling with sin in that regard, or in any regard, really, just keep getting back on the horse, keep fighting that urge to just kind of drift away and get kind of apathetic about things, or get kind of lukewarm, and let the guilt or the shame or whatever it is like pull you further away from God. Just remember that that's what the enemy wants. When you do that and when you fall into that, he is happy as a little clam, okay? We don't want that, okay? We want to make God happy, and what makes him happy is not us being absolutely perfect. And that's why he sent his son in the first place, because he knew, he was like, girl, okay, these people need help, like clearly just trying to follow the Jewish law to a T is not really working, so we need to step it up a notch. That's definitely a paraphrase of how that went down, but that's kind of how I see it. I don't believe that we could truly be sanctified and truly become godly people ourselves simply by following the laws to a T. I think having faith in Jesus, that literally puts the Holy Spirit within us, and that leads us towards becoming more godly people because we have the Spirit within us. It's not really something that we could just kind of force ourselves into doing, be perfect, follow the law, follow. Like, I don't know. I don't really see anyone who's trying to do that who's really succeeding or seem very happy. A lot of times that it looks like to me that creates a lot of neuroticism and anxiety, and how could it not? Like, we are innately fallen creatures, and if we're trying to be perfect just by the laws and not by having Jesus's help, how could we do that? Like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, that's a really, really challenging road to be on, even more challenging than just trying to walk the narrow road to heaven, right? So yeah, if you are struggling, just keep getting back on the horse. I completely understand how you are feeling. I am going through things also, and I was hesitant to even make this video because some of the comments, the mean comments that I've gotten have been kind of discouraging, but I'm not gonna let that stop me. I love making these videos. I love sharing with you guys, and I really appreciate the kind, encouraging, uplifting things that the rest of you share in the comments. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful for you. Please do add anything that you might find helpful, your experiences with this, or things that you have found to be helpful in this regard in the comments, or your experiences. Have you been in an unequally yoked relationship? Did you end up getting married? Did you end up breaking up? What happened? Like, let us know. We could use some more data on this, right? So thank you so much for watching and listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your day or night. All right.